leaking top insider stock trades every day until they stop us. Today we looked through about 253 insider trades, most of them totally useless, but we're trying to find the handful that can be high signal and help us outperform. Just as a quick reminder, we're looking for unscheduled and abnormal insider trades. If the insider has a history of success buying the stock before it goes up or selling before it goes down, that's a huge bonus. And then obviously if multiple insiders are buying or abnormally large buys or sells, that's also a big plus. So looking at the number of insider purchases for sales that were filed, we have a very low ratio of buys to sells, as you can see. After a couple of days of slightly higher ratios here, we're now way down at just 9% of the insider filings that came in yesterday were for purchases, which is kind of continuing a theme. We've been a little low here for a little while. Not anything too crazy. You know, we go low quite a bit and it's not really that high of a signal. The high signal is when we get these huge insider buying bars here, which we obviously don't have. So not a huge signal, but definitely leans slightly bearish. Let's go take a look now at the insider trades. We will look at bullish returns because we'll start with the purchases. Let's look at the most recent ones coming in. Purchases, and we'll filter by transaction value. So we're starting up at the top here. We've got Alpha Metallurgical Resources. We have director probably buying $16 million of the stock, certainly a notable size. It's interesting too that, while looking historically, nailed their sales as well. So that's also very, very interesting. Looks like she must have bought a different stock. Let's go take a look because his buy returns are pretty terrible, but it wasn't with Alpha Metallurgical Resources. So it was down here with Innovate. He timed his buys pretty bad, right? Just kind of nailed the peak here back then. Let's see if there's any info we can see about what these purchases might have been like. Nope, looks like it was just a normal purchase. So historically not great, but again, that was, you know, many years ago, back 5 years ago, back in Innovate. In terms of his timing so far at Alpha Metallurgical Resources, he has nailed his sales, hasn't bought yet. The stock is probably, let's go take a look at what the trend line is going to say. It looks like it started to flatten out, but I would bet, oh, look at that. It did just recently cross the 200-day SMA, so it's now officially, you know, in an uptrend, which is, you know, if you have any interest in technical analysis, would be, you know, one of the basic things you'd like to see. Momentum continues, as they say. So I think that's pretty interesting. As far as news goes, we can look to see if there's any news here. Just looking at the press releases. Looks like, you know, maybe that a fatal accident not too long ago, but doesn't look like there's anything crazy there. If we can go to Edgar real quick and just see if they have any other filings that we may have missed. Specialized disclosure report. Specific payment disclosure required by this form is in Exhibit 2. Resource extraction payment report. So I don't know if there's anything particularly pressing there for us. So overall, it just looks like a, you know, an insider buying into some strength here at the company who's had a track record of good sales. I would certainly file that under particularly interesting. Also looks like there's been very little insider trading over the last year. This was their Kenneth's sale. Somebody nailed the short-term sale here, or a couple of insiders did, which looks like these were unscheduled sales. So normally you wouldn't like to see, again, you wouldn't really like to see the president and COO and the CFO selling some stock. So that's certainly a knock against them. Though overall, I would say, you know, this larger, much larger purchase coming in from a director who has a track record of good timing with their selling would certainly kind of outweigh it. Plus you overlay and this person has nailed their selling as well, you know, was selling up here too and bought pretty well. Overall, I would still say, you know, ideally wouldn't have seen these two sales come in, but I think overall this is still a pretty strong buy. Moving on, Saba Capital continuing to buy Ace of Gold, which gold got hit a little bit after the Fed cut interest rates, but they've been buying it up. We see it pretty much every couple times a week now. This looks like this was part of some sort of purchase agreement, which means he probably was able to buy the stock at a price you probably can't, as disclosed in a purchase agreement way back in March. And then as another one in August. So kind of old news just getting filed now, or actually officially going through. Our equity holdings, this is another one where it looks like this guy, my hunch is he's just probably transferring the stock to a different, I don't really know why you would both buy and sell stock at the exact same time. So not entirely sure what's going on there. That's kind of a weird one. Not much we can do with that one. So now, I mean, not very many large, look, we're pretty quickly getting down to very small sales here. However, I do think if we're just looking through some of these, we've got a couple insiders buying Eon Resources, which I think we also saw just the other day too. So quite a lot of buying really at Eon Resources, which I think is pretty notable here. In a similar-ish same-ish, also in the oil and gas. It's not oil and gas, I guess, but in the same general, people that trade each one would tend to be involved in both those sectors, and they can tend to be correlated with each other. So interesting to see that. Quite a lot of buying here at Eon Resources. It doesn't look like these guys have a very good track record of buying, if we're just, the stock has kind of been going down forever. But it is always, anytime you start to just see, the size is bigger too, as we can see from the bars down here. At least recently, these are bigger purchases. This would be one of the stocks down, 60% in the last year, 95% in the last 2 years. This actually can get, obviously you're playing with a company that is currently not good at all, a pretty terrible company. But if these insiders will obviously be the ones that have the insight into if things are turning around. Doesn't look like I was trying to see if there's any news. So this would be one of those ones where you'd want to go figure out if you can concoct why now might be a good turnaround story. And the fact that they've tried buying the stock quite a few times before and it hasn't really worked out. The stock is still down 10% in the last 6 months. It's still down, which I guess 6 months ago was really the first time we started to see these cluster buys, and we had just seen selling up here. So obviously it hasn't worked so far, but I don't hate this these buys, especially if we continue to see them buying. But you'd want to figure out what might be the reason things turn around. If we come down here to Oblong, this is one of those crypto treasury companies that we talked about, but I do think it's interesting. Crypto treasury companies are just as shady as it gets, so I do think seeing this buying, which we've never seen before, is notable, and I think we probably continue to see them attempt to pump the stock here. They issued a shareholder or a letter a week ago trying to pump the stock. Didn't work, but I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see that happen. Now, one other stock purchase that I do think is quite interesting here is TKO. So TKO, owns the UFC. This guy's now bought back here in June. So not, much time has passed, but the stock's almost up 20% since then. Just bought again for roughly, the same amount of dollars. It's a director not related to the company in any way, or not. He's kind of like an outside independent director. He's not part of like a big investing group or anything like that. So I think this is notable. Also, if you just look, I hope to have this data available publicly soon, but the entertainment industry has been one of the hottest, top 3 of there's 70 plus something industries, and entertainment's been in the top 3 in terms of momentum over the last year. So high momentum there. This stock itself has positive momentum. They also announced $1 billion in share purchases. They announced a 100% increase in the quarterly cash dividend. This to me is just all screaming like high momentum. I don't know exactly what the story might be. You could probably figure that out if you wanted a longer term, maybe a longer term holding period. But for me, this stock, if we go look at TKO over here. I don't know why I don't just type it in the search bar instead of doing it up here. But as you can see, just, the 200's way down here. So it bounced off the 200 twice already. So this is one of those ones where, to me, ideally we would have bought it back in June when it was a little closer to 200 when that guy first bought it. But still, it's just positive momentum stock, and all of these announcements kind of just scream like, hey, this momentum is probably going to keep going for quite a while. So this would be one of those ones where you just buy it and you just hold it while it's sitting above the 200-day simple moving average. And then obviously if you do enough research, you can probably come up with some sort of story maybe for why, like a fundamental story for why this could be a longer term hold. But simply as a momentum play, I think it's pretty interesting. Let's now switch over to the sales and see what we've got going on over there. Walton family buying Walmart. Every time they do this, I do like to point out, I don't think these are high signal sales really, but it is kind of interesting that they just never, they literally never sold Walmart stock until the end of last year. And now the stock's, it's up probably about 10% since they started selling. So probably slightly underperforming the S&P. Actually probably underperforming the S&P quite a bit since the end of 2024. I don't think the stock's not going to crash anytime soon, but it is interesting that they just started selling then. Magnetar Financial continues to sell CoreWeave. It's just post IPO lockup selling. Obviously there is some pressure on the stock when you have a bunch of people selling it, but I don't think this was unexpected to see all that selling. Though it is now the second most sold stock over the last 30 days. Behind, I don't actually remember what the number 1 is right. Number 1's like Fox and News Corp has some succession planning stuff going on that's caused a ton of selling from the Murdoch family and whatever that other family's name is. Besides those two, CoreWeave has the most selling. Rocket Lab, only interesting here because the stock is up so much, 500% in the last year, and you've got the CEO now deciding to sell. Looks like he probably started a new 10b5-1 plan. He had to have because he's never sold before. So insiders don't have a history of selling particularly good, or don't have a particularly good good history of selling. The stock's certainly still going to be in an uptrend. This is one of those ones, though, that at some point in time, this probably comes back down to earth, even if just for, a short period of time. And the momentum's probably slowing down a little bit, but trying to time this type of play is just pretty brutal. Also, as a 10b5-1 plan, he is more than likely going to just continue selling. So way above the 200 days still. So still has very positive momentum. Also, just retail investors love this stock. So it's going to be a tough one to try to time. But I would bet he continues to sell on as part of this 10b5-1 plan. $127 million though. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at. And if we continue to see him selling, we continue to see the momentum, maybe flatten out here as it has over the last 3 months or so. Not even 3 months. Maybe over the next couple months, this could become an interesting stock to sell, and or I guess maybe short, but right now I think that'd be a tough one. This, we just got a bunch of 10% owners, not super interesting. 10b5-1 plan for the CEO at Uber has been going on a while. Yeah, another 10b5-1 plan, this time CEO, or the other founder, I guess, at Airbnb. Nothing you can do with a chart like that. And we have our first large still a 10% owner. I thought maybe since we just had the name, it would be an individual, but I guess not. Timing, not particularly good. I don't even want to look at it. 10b5-1 selling at Tesla, only the third time for this director recently. Tesla's going to be a tough one. Elon got that new pay package. He's going to be pumping this stock for sure. And Elon made that $1 billion purchase. So I don't think there's much to do there. A couple of 10b5-1 plans, not particularly good. Dave selling on the 10b5-1 plans, but man, the people selling Dave stock right now are killers in terms of how good their timing on previous sales are. So if we just look at this guy, I guess he's only sold Dave twice, and they've been around the same price. So not much for us to do with those sales specifically. But if we look kind of back historically, well, we can look at this purchase at Zeta whatever Global real quick, which he nailed the timing on, at least in the short term. Bought this dip and it went up quite a bit after that in the short term, I guess. So long term didn't work out too well, but he did catch himself. What is that? Probably a 40% short term gain or something like that. So not too bad. But if we look at his Snapchat selling, it's going to be timed pretty well, I would assume. I guess it was very early on, but he was selling up at 16 and then fell down to 6, and he was selling the whole way down. I guess not the most signal really. I mean, that was so long ago. That's kind of hard to glean much from, but it is interesting that he is now selling for the first time since 2018. He's selling stock. But the more interesting thing at Dave, the reason why I say the insiders are killers, besides just that guy, is really this dude selling the stock, who has so perfectly nailed every purchase and sale that he has ever made. So he bought twice down here. Obviously, the stock's way up. Now he's been selling in this range. And then if we go to his core scientific, he literally bought the stock right before. This was in May, and then literally a month later, they announced that acquisition that shot the stock up, and he's up, I don't know, however much he's up, 50% since then. And then he also sold, then before that he sold at the very top, right? And then he purchased twice more down here at the bottom. So his timing has just been impeccable. The only difference here being these 10b5-1 plans, these two most recent sales are part of 10b5-1 plans, which none of these other ones were scheduled before. However, in this case, like this guy, I just do whatever he does. His track record is so good that, Dave, it definitely had me concerned for Dave. Let's look at maybe a couple more here. Any other? So here, now we do finally, maybe non-10% owner, Thomas Triforos, whatever that crazy last name is. See if we can get this chart to load real quick. Hims Health, this is another one. We've been seeing the CEO here now selling the stock quite a bit, though he's sold the stock so much, I don't think there's much insight to be gleaned from those, but he did make this one large unscheduled sale. Literally his largest sale ever, $33 million. His only unscheduled sale ever happened right here. This would be another one of those stocks. It's in the healthcare space where, again, we've seen a bunch of buying before, at companies like Bosch Health or at obviously United Healthcare and Eli Lilly. And then you've got on the other end of the spectrum, we've got some companies with insider selling like Hims. To me, if I was looking at this sector, that'd be a pretty easy decision for me to be like, probably going to skip out on Hims here and go for a different healthcare company that has a little more both positive momentum and some more bullish insiders. So if we look over at Copart now, we've got this insider selling out of what appears to be a director selling his entire stake, which you always like to see. Well, you hate to see if you own the stock, but in terms of signal, it's a pretty good signal. We've seen insiders have been selling quite a bit for a while. I don't know if the timing isn't particularly great across the board. This guy seems like he has a little bit better timing on his own, which let's see. Looks like he's been at a couple companies. We can look at his historic Copart selling. Not the best timing in the world. Was a little early here. Did kind of get this one just pretty close to the dip there. Right around COVID times, was able to time that. Obviously nailed the top here, not particularly great down here, and then has now been selling kind of up here above the $40 level. So I think the only notable thing here really is moderate selling success. I wouldn't say his historic returns are really that great. Just the fact that he sold his entire holding, though, I think is definitely something worth pointing out. And then if we look at Copart, just see if anybody else of size has been selling or with good returns. This guy back in April has good timing. Stephen Cohen, not the famous investor Stephen Cohen, I would assume, but he nailed the top up here. So this is one I'm sure it has negative momentum. So this could be one that's like, I don't think it's going to fall off a cliff anytime soon, but I do think overall the story on this one, well below that. Overall, the story on this one I don't think is particularly strong. To me, this would be one, pretty easy to avoid if for whatever reason I have no interest in this stock, but if I did, I'd probably avoid it. If I owned it, I'd probably go try to find something better. I think if we look through anything else here, Brian Armstrong selling 10b5-1 plan, more selling at HIMS, 10b5-1 plans. Sundar's been selling quite a while, just regular sales there at Google. Nothing to write home about. Continued selling by this director at Klaviyo, or by the CEO at Klaviyo. I believe other people have been selling Klaviyo too. Again, I don't think the highest signal here, but yeah, quite a bit of selling there. Continued 10b5-1 selling at Unity, which we've seen. I don't think that's the highest signal. I guess the one we'll end on is the Loan Depot, because many of you probably saw Citron Research posted a bullish report right around here, and the stock is now up 100% since they posted their bullish report. And then insiders have just been dumping the stock since that came out. This guy's the CEO, and he's just like, thank you for pumping my stock. I'm now going to go make my largest sales ever and sell millions and millions of dollars of the stock. So by far the most insider selling that's ever happened is happening right now at $46 million, well above what would be the next closest at $13 million in Q4 of 2024. This one, though, this is going to be another one. It's very popular, has a ton of momentum, going to be hard to get the timing right, though I do think the stock actually fell quite a bit today. 10% today. So this would be one, to pay attention to if it starts to roll over, but trying to time it, a tough game to play. So you can head to CEOWatcher.com to see all the insider trades, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you later.